Okay, well, welcome everyone to another episode of the Online Entrepreneur Academy podcast. And today it is my great pleasure, and we've been trying to get this together for quite a while, to welcome Dave Rindl to the podcast. So Dave, welcome. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Susan. A pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much indeed. So as you probably know, my audience is entrepreneurs, online business owners, the home business owners. So with that in mind, and you've got loads and loads of experience in the business world, tell us, if you wouldn't mind, a little bit about you and what you do and how you help people. And
sure.
And when you started, because it's been a while, hasn't it? You're very experienced.
Yeah, I'll go to that first of all, because I've been in development in some form for about 35 years. So a lot less grey hairs when I started. But I went out as an independent back in 2001. And so essentially just over 20 years, except that I've had a hiatus in that period dealing with some family stuff. So I've really only started relaunching and so on about 2 years ago. So whichever you prefer, I've been in business 35 years, 20 years, or 2 years. But yeah.
I think you've a wealth of experience for sure.
What I do and how I work with individuals, I work with organizations, I work for myself, and I work as an associate. For instance, I'm working with a colleagues consultancy at the moment. We're working with just to give you an idea, the kind of people working with a large legal company at the moment, doing some leadership stuff, a large household name tech company with various teams there doing various stuff. So I love to work with people. That's what I'm about. And in short, I work with people from a couple of perspectives. Either they come to me with what occurs to them like a problem, an issue.
Yeah.
And we get to work on that. And that's, it's no different from hundreds of other coaches out there in that way. Or I work with people alongside them where they've got a big vision. And I work alongside them to fulfill either the whole vision or part of it. And very often when they come to me with an issue or problem, in resolving that, they discover that's in service of a vision they've got. That vision may not have been articulated yet.
Right, interesting. So it's uncovered during the coaching process.
Yeah. People, I was working with a client of mine earlier this week. She took me on to support her writing a book. And there are various other things. She took me on in the role of an accountability partner. I said to her when we started, are you willing to discover some things along the way as well, not just accountability partner? She said, yeah. And during the session earlier this week, she started saying, yeah, maybe there's another book there. Oh yeah, maybe there's that to take on. So people discover I'm working with a guy who, extraordinary man, in the financial sector, big companies setting up, came to me because he wants to focus on that. But there's some stuff in his personal life that is related, because what's in the background, and I'll say more about that in a second, but what's in the background that's been shaping where he's stuck and how he's been dealing with stuff is also very much related to stuff in his personal life. So there's stuff he's uncovered there which wasn't expected.
Right. And they do, as I think it's just, they lead into each other, don't they? They're not separate in separate boxes, any shape or form.
I think a lot of us in life, we go through life and we try to compartmentalize. And it works for some people, and you can sometimes. However, I'm a great believer that it's all connected. That word that, sorry, carry on, please.
I was going to say, guilty as charged as trying to I can't say that now. Put things in boxes.
That one, yeah.
Yeah, that one, exactly. But sorry, I interrupted you saying, but it doesn't always work.
Well, part of my experience is this. Part of why we attempt to do that is because there's either we think one might do damage or something to the other one, or there's something we don't want to deal with over there, whether it's consciously or not.
Yeah.
Now, those things that we don't particularly want to deal with, certainly unconsciously, tend to dangle us along by the scruff of the neck. They kind of unless we address them, or unless we at least are willing to look at them,
Yeah.
they've got the rule over us. So very often it's not about going and digging around, but it's about people having the freedom to engage with something, to deal with it. And then for me, there's that word that's used all over the place, but it is holistic. It all fits together.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it like a jigsaw puzzle, and if you've got a few pieces missing, it's not complete. It's an image that I can understand, and
Absolutely
holistic, as you say. Yeah, and there's a few things that you said there that are making me think maybe I ought to look at, and I'm sure the listeners will be thinking, yeah, there's a couple of things I've been shoving away, but perhaps just acknowledge, if I understand you correctly, please correct me, acknowledge that they're there, and don't fight it, perhaps just admit the elephant in the room, or even the tiny little mouse in the room, but the one that's bugging.
It's so my experience, by the way, not everyone chooses to look in the way I do, or other people I know choose to. But still, after 35 years of engaging with this kind of stuff, I'm still going, oh, how come I didn't see that one before? Or, oh, and it's not always necessarily comfortable, except that what it allows for, what's on the other side of it, is extraordinary. I'm working on not to do with my business, I'm working on a team at the moment, and some of the people in the team were very much engaged in this kind of conversation anyway. And I was speaking to someone the other day, and she'd called me asking for some support with something. And she started to see, and this kind of, it's not an unusual thing, but she saw she had a fear of failing. And so she was totally constrained around something she was taking on, because there's this being petrified of failing. And in the conversation, she actually got that she would survive. I mean, it might sound funny, that, but it's like, actually got, oh, I'd survive, my family would survive, we'd be okay. And it freed her up. And seeing her in action afterwards was, I mean, she was able to fully express herself and her passion come forward and so on. It wasn't like that or however you describe it,
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes huge sense, actually. And I guess that a lot of us don't necessarily realize or recognize what is, in this example, stopping us. And it may be a fear that doesn't actually exist, as you just said. Nothing's going to change in the biggest sense anyway. I recently heard Steve Bartley speak, and he was saying that he rewards his team for trying things out. So it doesn't matter if it's a success or failure, but try it out. And maybe that we could say that's a luxury of someone who's very successful, but we've got to try, haven't we?
Yeah, and maybe I love that, firstly. And it's interesting, we relate to things like they're luxuries sometimes, or I don't have time for that, or I don't have capacity, except that it's interesting what happens when we take the time for it. Before I moved into this, I worked in the financial sector. And one of my superiors pulled me over one day, and because I would take my time out to talk with someone when there was an issue, to talk with them, to enable them to resolve the issue. And she kind of came over to me and said, you don't have time for that. And thankfully, I was at a point in my life, because there was a point where I'd just gone, oh, I shouldn't be doing that, and I'd backed off. But I was at a point in my life where I had sufficient confidence to say, well, hold on a minute. How much time do you think we lose by them continuing to make that mistake?
Exactly.
And the conversation went round in circles a few times, but eventually my superior got it. And they went, oh, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I said, I do longer hours, most people here do longer hours anyway. I get my work done, but I'm trying to make it so that we don't have the same problems going forward. And but so obvious, so often we're caught in firefighting or what's next, and it actually takes taking a step back sometimes. Yeah,
absolutely. And obviously there's two sides to that, aren't there, which I think you were telling us, the cost to a big company of re-recruitment or correcting mistakes that could have been solved at the on the ground floor and help that person develop. But also it's reaching out to the individual, isn't it? And people, and in companies, especially big companies, I find there's so many anonymous people, and if the employees knew that management were interested in them, genuinely interested in them, it would help so many people and help the bottom line. Let's face it,
Yeah, I mean, there are some organizations, some companies seriously doing this kind of work, and it makes a massive difference. But it is challenging because a lot of employees, a lot of people on the ground think that the management aren't interested. A lot of the management think the employees are got it in for them.
Yes.
And when that stuff can kind of melt away.
Yes.
I mean, I tend to talk about little case studies a lot, and there's another one which I think demonstrates this. I was asked to go into an organization, NHS Trust, and I was asked to come for a meeting with someone. The person didn't turn up for the meeting, and I ended up speaking to their boss. And in speaking to their boss, they told me some of the issues, and I've been asked to, it's never ideal when you're asked to come into an organization to coach that person over there. Now, coaching normally needs to be something where someone, if not a hard request for it, at least is, yeah, okay, I'll take the coaching on.
Yeah.
This person
They
clearly
meet
hadn't
you somewhere along the path.
clearly hadn't been. So I was speaking to their boss, and at some point in the conversation, I said, well, have you considered coaching so that you can, really transform that relationship so you can make a difference to the person? And she said to me, she said, well, I haven't considered coaching, but she said, I have been looking at coaching, but I hadn't considered it for that reason. And she started working with me. And it came out that a person who'd missed the meeting had taken grievances out against their 3 previous managers, had taken a grievance out against my client. And the organization clearly had that person stuck in a corner over there, not knowing what to do with them. Oh, we'll get a coach in. And in working with my client was fabulous. I thought if I worked for this organization, I'd love her as my manager. She was great. But she discovered that she was great when people were on board and willing to play. But when it was a peer or someone reporting to her or someone she was reporting to, it was a bit hard. She would do that, and she would cut them, almost like cut them out.
Yeah.
And she started to get past that. Halfway through me working with her, the person reporting to her had the grievance against her, withdrew the grievance, and started asking her for support in dealing with her own issues. Now,
great
when
result.
she finished working with me, she said, when I first started with you, I had a meeting with the person the next week and I was dreading it. She said, now I've got a meeting with her next week. I can't wait because it's an opportunity to make a difference. That's for me the kind of shift that is possible for all of us when we're willing to deal with the uncomfortable stuff. Yeah.
And that's very true. And we can look at it in our business life, whether as a business owner, employee, and also in our personal lives, of course. Yeah, what a great message. Yeah, so as you speak, I'm thinking like hold up the mirror and try and look in the mirror and see where we can make things better. Thank you. That's a wonderful story and a great result. And I'm sure it's with companies that are enlightened or people that are willing to take that step forward. It makes a huge difference, because most of us have to work in some way, and it needs to be pleasant and lovely as much as possible. I think
it was, yeah.
You've got a variety of clients. So, business teaching and coaching, that we think of the avatar, and obviously when people are successful, we think of Tony Robbins. They start off with one avatar, so to speak, and then they branch out. So did you consciously start up with one avatar, or has it grown organically? I'd be very interested to know, because it seems to be bucking the trend, although obviously after 35 years you've got a variety.
Grown organically. I suppose, if I'm going to hold my hands up, I suppose there's part of me that was don't tell me what to do, and everyone's saying, oh, you've got to have an avatar, or you've got to have your niche, and so on. And I think that particular conversation, that model, is brilliant. In fact, if I'm working with clients on sales or marketing or something, I get them to look at it, but it's also, some people hold it like it is the answer or something. At one point, I was running with some colleagues an open leadership development program, and we had people coming from all kinds of different organizations, including some NHS trusts.
Right.
And there was something about working with the NHS trusts which I liked, and I just decided at that point, this was 15 plus years ago, to start calling NHS trusts. And I called, I think, or contacted every NHS trust in the home counties, and ended up working with 10 of them. So you could say that was the niche I set out with. But then more recently, I've worked with a Chinese medical practitioner. I've worked with this person writing a book who's a consultant. I'm working with someone who's another coach who's developed their own methodology, but they've got a big global vision. They're really trying to make a difference. Working with this guy in the financial industry, worked with an HR professional. So it really depends. It starts with a conversation. I meet people or I'm introduced to people, and it starts with a conversation. Maybe I should be more focused, but I'm not complaining.
It seems to work fine, and I'm sure you get referrals as well. So something you said there made me think. A lot of coaches say that they can't scale, and I wonder if it's something that you've looked at, because maybe not everyone needs to look at it. That's really the question, because coaching tends to be thought of as one-to-one, but is it necessarily always one-to-one? So then obviously the time is limited. Is it group coaching? Is it courses? Any advice on that for people who are thinking, how do I scale? There's going to be a limit, even when I get my diary full.
I think there are a few answers to that, and I mean, there's some people out in the world who specialize in talking about that. So it might be, if people are particularly interested in that, there's some people talking about how to do that. But because I work as both a coach and consultant, and I will work with individuals, I'll work with teams, I'll work with whole organizations. So whatever work I do is within a coaching context, developmental. But I've been very fortunate to work with some extraordinary people over the years, and including the consultants I'm working with at the moment. And if an organization wanted me to deliver something for 50, 100, 500 people, we could put a team together. So that's not an issue. In terms of working one-to-one and deciding that's all you want to do and then scaling, of course, one's limited for time. But my plans are, and I'm behind my own curve with this, is to put a program together, which means I can work with 10, 15 people at a time. They actually benefit from the interaction within the program, the community. And then I'll be able to deliver value to more people in shortest period of time. There are various different ways of doing it. Some people I know of developing online stuff. I'm not sure if that works as well as it might, but some people seem to be doing that with success. So I don't have a definitive answer for you there. I'm afraid
it's one that's often asked, and thank you. And it just again goes to show that it depends on the client, on each coach's or the situation, broadly speaking. There's no one answer, no one thing that fits all, which sort of really negates my next question, because I was going to ask you.
Go for it.
I'll go for it, and take this very broadly, because obviously there isn't. But if you were advising someone starting up a business, and we can take any example you choose, but what are the common issues that why do people fail? That's really what I want to ask. Have you seen common broad issues that cause people to either get disheartened or just totally fail when they shouldn't have done, really?
There's a massive variety of reasons, and what it all comes down to is something's not getting dealt with. I mean, I know that might sound ridiculously obvious.
No, it doesn't.
Something's not getting dealt with, and something's not getting dealt with in real time. But then there's something about how the person or the people running the business are relating to that thing. So it could be a breakdown in the relationship within the organization. It could be one of my clients recognized, not particularly through me working with her, but it was while we were working together, recognized that they avoided dealing with the numbers. They're just moving on from their second accountant in a certain period of time and couldn't get their head around why it wasn't working, then realized that they had an issue about dealing with the numbers. So they took it on. They could box themselves in and sat with the numbers and sat with them. And it was an incredibly uncomfortable period for them until they had got past whatever that was. I can't remember what it was in the background for them, but they didn't want to deal with it. And it's, looking back, it very often seems like, was it really that significant? But the most seemingly insignificant things can produce, for want of a better word, trauma.
Yeah.
Can produce our reluctance to go there.
Yeah.
And when we're willing to take a look at what's in the background, which is why I work this way, some coaches only work on action, results, action. And I've met some people who've worked with people like that, and they've stopped. And I said, why? And they said, well, I wasn't doing what I needed to be doing. And I said, well, did the coach stop and have a conversation with you about how come? And they looked at me blankly.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always taking a look what's in the background. And, you know, that can be a variety of things. And sometimes it can be buried. Sometimes we don't even get it in the way we'd expect to, like conscious thoughts. Sometimes we have to go to feelings. I don't know if you've ever heard of somatic coaching.
No, tell me.
I'm not a trained somatic coach, so I'm not going to pretend I am, but I just give you a flavor of it. It starts with the body. There's one of the great exponents of it, this guy called Richard Strozzi Heckler. He was an Aikido practitioner as well. And he had a dojo, which for people who don't do martial arts is your training or combat area. And he had a dojo built where he had a ranch outside some town in America where he worked from. And everyone came to work at his place, all his clients came there. And he started in the dojo. So he started with the physical. And why I love that is because we're very good, most of us, at using language.
Yes.
Very, very good. And language is critical and it really provides something. But there's a lot that happens in the unsaid, that we carry feelings, emotions, all kinds of stuff, which you almost have to access by putting language aside to begin with. You have to be present to it. And in the moment we're present to that which is in our body, language kind of gives us access to it. So it's kind of dancing with the two.
Yeah, interesting.
Somatic coaching starts with the body, and we carry a lot in our body, which we're not even, we don't even know that we're carrying stuff in our body, let alone know what it is. So when we start to look at that, suddenly something else becomes available. Now, I'm not suggesting going into every company and talking about that, but if people are open to it, people are open to that exploration, it provides something extraordinary. And I've heard some extraordinary stories about that kind of work, and with kind of almost people identifying what I'd call pre-language imprinting. So from very, very young, imprinting that had happened, and then able to see, oh, that happened. And we normally make meaning consciously, like we add words and so on, but this is kind of almost meaning added without that at a visceral level, let's call it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It makes huge sense, actually. And I think it'll give a lot of the listeners to the podcast a moment to pause and think. Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said at the top of the conversation about coaches not necessarily asking the clients why things don't work. And there could be so many reasons for that, of course. But I know from the adult education classroom when I was teaching business at university, sometimes you just know that a student would be brilliant at whatever the topic is, but you're not reaching them in the right way, or they're not able to access, I'll put it more that way, they're not able to access it, and it's presented in a different way, in a different format, and suddenly it clicks, or you know, the next step is possible. So yeah, makes huge sense. I really, really like that. Now, looking down at my notes here, I have, and I think you might have already explained this, to be fair, but I noticed you have use the phrase powerful coaching, but I'm going to ask you, what does that mean, powerful coaching?
It's a good question.
Because what you said already is pretty powerful, to be honest. So
okay, I would like to think that all coaching, you know, amazing people out there as coaches. I'm blessed to know a ridiculous number of them, and it's a pin drop. I'd like to think all coaching is powerful. I suppose the reason I use the word powerful coaching is so that people reading it, putting the word powerful, they're, oh, there's power there. I mean, it's about empowerment. It leaves people empowered. And am I saying by that there's such a thing as not powerful coaching? Or probably, but I'm actually not standing in accusation. It's a great question because I hadn't actually thought, what do I mean by that? I just take it for granted.
I think it's interesting what you said, because when I read it, it jumped out at me for all the right reasons that you've just said. And I was feeling the sense of empowerment. This is what Dave offers. I will feel empowered. People clearly, from what you've said, feel empowered. And I also think it's about choosing, when we're choosing a coach, because all of us have coaches at some point, teachers, whatever word we like to use, but it's choosing the person that's right for us, isn't it? We are not all right for everybody in the same. And no offense taken if someone else suits, is better off with another coach.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely better. But no, it certainly was empowering, and it made me stop. I think that's why I picked that word out, because I was skimming through powerful coaching. I really like that. That's so relatable. Empowering, yeah. So I'll go with that. Absolutely.
Phew, I got past that question.
No, but it's true, very sincerely. We've always looked to find a niche, so that's one way of working out a business. But I often feel that I might be wrong, so correct me, sometimes the most successful people, perhaps home business owners or people who are solopreneurs, are those who are actually extraordinary at what they do. Now, having said that, I've known, for example, brilliant craftspeople who are terrible at business initially and they have to get help. But do you think that's a good way to start a business? Or what are the issues, perhaps, if someone is absolutely extraordinary at what they do, but is that a way forward?
I think once again, I was about to say it's an either or, but there are probably multiple approaches. There might be something you're extraordinary at what you do, or you really enjoy something, and you want to start a business with that. And then it's like, well, what does it take to start a business? Because as you said, starting a business is different from doing something.
Yes, that's so different.
It took me many, many years to understand that. And it's kind of obvious. But then there may be someone wants to start a business and they might go, well, what could I do that would be profitable?
Yeah.
Because it depends what your purpose in starting the business is. I mean, I think that's a good question as well. What is your purpose in starting the business? For some people, it's, I don't want to go and work for someone else. For some people, it's, I have this vision I want to see fulfilled, and sitting in a job isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
It really depends where you start. I tend to talk to people about what is it you want to accomplish? What is it you want to leave? Whether it's a difference you want to make, or there's something you love doing, which is more that, I love doing this, is more of a mission than a vision. I love doing this and I want to do that, or I want to be able to do that. Then how do I train myself? So multiple answers to that. And I know that doesn't give you, once again, a definitive answer, but it's, I think you have to start in that conversation. And very often that's particularly around that question, but it's around everything as well, as why a coach makes a difference. And I'll say something about that. When we think on our own, our brain has trained itself to work in a certain way over the years.
Yes.
To deal with life, to make sense of life, to keep us safe, to survive something, real or implied, whatever.
Yeah, 100%.
Imagined, whatever. Therefore, our brain is only going to give us, at one level, more of the same.
Yes.
On its own. Which is why having a coach works, because it allows us to step outside of what's already there. Allows us to step outside of that pattern, or at the very least be aware that there might be something outside of the pattern and explore that. Because on my own, my brain keeps me going down the same tunnel.
It's on repeat, isn't it? Yeah, no, that's extremely interesting. And I think very much of an insight that will, again, when you're listening to the podcast, have a think about what Dave just said, because very, very relatable, and I think will help a lot of people to stop in their tracks, even if they've not got a coach at the moment, which we both would firmly advise. But just stop and think, am I on repeat? Or you put it more eloquently than that, but yeah.
I think am I on repeat is beautifully eloquent, actually.
Thank you for that.
I might steal that.
Yeah, go for it, the kind coach. Thanks. Now, I have some questions from my audience. They gave me these ones. So again, these are big questions, and please do drill down on the answer, because it would take us all afternoon to answer these. What should a new business focus on? And would it was the first part, which we sort of spoke about in a way. We look at problems, but and is it the same for trade, online, educational? So what's the focus? Is it marketing? Is it on the online presence?
Can you repeat the second part of the question? Because what's
Yeah.
your new business focus on? And is it what?
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Would you give the same advice to a trade, an online business, an educational service?
Oh,
And
I get what you're saying.
It's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah, and well, but very simply, I think there are a few questions. What is it that you do? What is your product or what is your service? Be clear on that. It's very useful to be clear on who your market is, or your ideal market is.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't put it out there to a lot of other markets, but be clear on who your ideal market is, or at least have looked at that. I'm not ruling out that some people might have a way of going out to what could be perceived as multiple markets, but be clear on that. Then also be clear on how you're going to deliver your service, or product, and that's all of the different things in it. I got this from a dear friend of mine who's a consultant many years ago. At some point in the process, and it's not necessarily the first thing, when you've got it all planned out, then sit down and have the conversation. What is going to go wrong? He said he went into one company and they very proudly showed him all these plans, and he said, great. He said, and what happens is, no, this is the plan. This was going to, he said, you've got to sit down, ask yourself the question. This will go wrong at some point. And that's difficult to confront sometimes, certainly when starting out.
Because you don't want to think about that.
We sometimes don't want to. Earlier when I was saying about my clients who, or it wasn't a client, it's someone in a project I'm working with, had right stared in the face a fear of failure. Sometimes that fear of failure, we don't want to confront it. We don't want to look at what's there. Also, what's useful to look at is one's own capacity.
Interesting.
How good are we at dealing with the different things? How good are we at delivering on our word? And that's a big one to answer.
Yeah.
I'm constantly working with that myself, and I'm constantly seeing how relatively weak I am in that area. I mean, and that's crazy. I work with people to deliver extraordinary results, and to have someone who does that, owning up, I'm weak around my word with certain things. Now, you speak to a lot of people, they go, Dave, Mr. Integrity, Dave delivers. But I promise you, I see everywhere where I let things slip, that, procrastination, all kinds of things. And when you can tell the truth about stuff like that, and you can then start to address it. Yeah,
it's very true. We can be our own worst critics, or conversely, not even see the problems.
It's great what you've just said as well. Great what you just said. Also, make sure you've got people on side who will, actually make sure you've got people on side full stop. Make sure you've got support network, but also people who remind you of how great you can be as well. As well as, for me to be able to talk so freely about how my word is so weak, I also need to be able to appreciate everything that's extraordinary over here. And that's not from an arrogance point of view, but just from, this is what I'm great at, this is what I'm strong at, but be able to deal with it like I would the engine of a car, and not take it personally. Engine of car, oh, that head gasket's blown. Oh no, that's running perfectly. No, the big end doesn't need change. Not a problem. I don't take it personally when the head gasket blows. It's just some work that needs doing. We don't look at our brains and so on like that, because it's so inextricably linked with our own emotions, our own personal values and so on. And when we can step back and observe that, it gives us some power.
Interesting. Now I'm going to re-listen to this myself, and just that's very, very, I've used the word insightful before, but this has been a conversation of insight, so thank you very much. Now there's a couple more serious questions.
Go on,
which leaves it hanging. What are the not so serious questions? Okay, someone else asked me to ask you. So I had two questions from my audience. The current UK budget aside, which is, we won't go there, whatever people's views are, what sort of things should people have in their sights for sudden change? Now, you've mentioned what I would call scenario planning already, and that's great. Look at what can happen. But are there any things we should really have on our radar, or does it change so much that we just have to be aware?
I'm hesitating because I'm not sure quite what I've got to say about this. I'm not someone who fashions myself as a futurologist and so on. And actually, the way I work is a type of work that some of the people I learned from have been doing this from the 70s, so 50 years. So trends, whilst trends have happened and there have been changes, a lot of what I'm doing is not only rooted in that, but I draw from, I draw from people in other centuries, philosophers, all kinds of stuff, as well as brain science. So, I'm not sure I'm always the best person for that, but to know that, I think it's useful to know that things change. I think to know that we hang on in the hope that something will come right. But then equally, some people change at the drop of a hat,
every week.
and that's not always good. No. I'm not what you'd call an early adopter, so there's that phrase. So new technology and so on, it takes me time to take it on board. I still tend to use notebooks and pens a lot of the time. I use data, I use all kinds of stuff, but I tend to use notebooks and pens a lot of the time. I like that physical thing with something in my hand. However, as I said, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that. So whoever asked that question, you might want to come back to Susan with your answers when you do your research.
Right, nicely passed over. But I will pick up on something you said there, which is very useful and wasn't in the question, as part of this person's question. But I personally think it can get really ridiculous. We use the technology, as you say, there's ways to use technology, we use pen and paper, but when I see people in companies emailing the person sitting at the next desk rather than a conversation, I get it, sometimes some things need to be on record, but I mean, have a conversation with someone, look them in the eye. It's, I don't know if I'm off base here, but I just think bring some humanity or humanness back into a lot of the communication. What do you think? That's really my...
I happen to agree with you, and I saw something yesterday.
I'm glad about that.
No, I saw something yesterday which had me stop and think.
Really?
So it's not quite the same, but it was, we have certain assumptions sometimes. Someone posted about, I paraphrase here, but it said, don't tell your people they have to be on screen in meetings. And then there was a conversation about it. And some people are uncomfortable. Some people have got stuff going on and actually enables them to engage if they don't necessarily have to be. As a manager, I would always encourage to hold stuff lightly, encourage people. I think it really works for people to be on screen, but then if someone's uncomfortable with it, I'd want to make myself available to have a chat with them. They might be uncomfortable talking about why. And so as a team, can we find a way to include them?
Exactly.
So it's about that. I mean, I've been doing some stuff recently. I'm not an inclusivity diversity specialist at all, but I've been doing some stuff, and we had some stuff in that program, and it's just woken me up even more. So it's, some people are more comfortable not having to go and have the eye-to-eye conversation. And whilst I would try to encourage them to explore how come and so on, demanding they do is just as damaging as know eye to eye, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. No, and very fair point indeed, because we never know what's going on in someone's life or in their situation. And thank goodness we have different channels of communication, which hopefully we can work out ones that will suit different people in different areas of our business. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, a little bit lighter now. I'm sure you're aware of our famous Radio 4 Desert Island disc. So I put my hands up each time to having pinched the idea from there. And I haven't asked Dave beforehand, like all guests, no time to prepare. You know what's coming, don't you? So you're on the desert island and you have one piece of music. Well, imagine that it can be played. How would you, what music would you?
One piece of music.
One. Now, some people cheat and have an LP. You and I remember the days.
Only allowed one.
Yes, on that desert island.
Oh, that's so unfair.
It just is. It's a tricky one, folks.
No, it is, because I'm caught between I'll say it's my music. It's I grew up in the 60s and 70s, but my music was rock and roll.
Yeah.
So I was born a little bit late for that. And then at some point I discovered jump jive and blues, and that's really all that whole era is my music. But then there are bits of opera I love. My wife loves opera, so bits of opera I love. I grew up with, my mother was South African. I grew up with South African music around me, Miriam Makeba, and my dad loved, the Don Cossack Choir, and I could name a dozen pieces of music.
Tapestry music.
However, one piece, and the piece that's right there at the moment, and is the Rolling Stones' Symphony for the Devil. There
we are then. Gosh, you had a lot to choose from there.
and that's just at the moment. Maybe it's because we watched the Stones program about the 4 individual ones recently. But yeah, I'll take that one.
And I'll tell you, I was lucky enough to see them live in concert. They were absolutely amazing in the last decade.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the 3 questions. So the next one is your luxury. You can have one luxury, or however you interpret luxury. So one luxury on your desert island.
One luxury.
You got your fish, you've got your plants and things like that.
Yeah.
One luxury.
And I've got some form of playing that music, so I don't need.
No, you don't need that. We'll allow you to play the music. Yes.
And I'd create some way of cooking.
It's interesting because I had a whole range of answers on this one.
Am I allowed a fully fueled long distance helicopter or not?
I was going to say someone chose a speedboat, so I think we'll let you have that. That's
okay. No, it's
sort of cheating in a way, but
I don't know what I'd have as a luxury, because most things I can think of, in a previous incarnation, in previous career, I was a chef, and but I'd make ways of cooking. It's like it's not that I need cookery equipment or
a special pan or
instruments or something. What would I want?
Because I find when I'm thinking that, I think each thing, well, actually I could do without that, let's move on to something else.
Yeah.
One of my guests
and everything I think of, it's like, would I want to watch? No, I do without time. It's like I do without man-made time. I don't know. I'm going to pass on that one. It's funny, I've listened to that program so many times. I thought, I found myself asked that. I'm passing. No luxury.
We'll let you do that. And as you probably guessed, the last one is a book. So you've got Shakespeare, and then someone wanted to chuck Shakespeare out. You've got Shakespeare and a spiritual tract of your own choice. So what other book would you take with you? You're not allowed to swap in Shakespeare. I didn't allow another guest to do that.
I understand. What other book would I take?
There's so many good books to choose from. It's back to almost like the luxury question, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm thinking of something light or something I've never read.
How to Build a Raft, I think someone said.
I don't know. How can I come down with one book?
Yeah,
Oh, let's
it is. We've had, what have we had?
let's take, well, I'm caught between two, and I think it would have to be, and I'm not
Okay.
defining the book, but maybe an omnibus of Spike Milligan.
Yeah. Okay, no, omnibus would be
Omnibus of
good.
Spike Milligan. That gives me a variety of his books, but yeah, I
Clever
just,
choice.
there's something delightfully, insanely sane about that.
That makes huge sense. And on that note, an opportunity to thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciate the insights. This is definitely a conversation that I would encourage people to re-listen to and literally take notes on. There's some very, very helpful things there. Before we go, and Dave, we'll put this in the show notes, but what is the best way for people to contact you? Obviously, there'll be details below the podcast, so wherever you're listening, please have a look.
There's three things. I put them on the end of my profile that you've got. There's my
that'll be
email
there.
address, there's my phone number, my mobile number, people can just get me on, or there's my LinkedIn profile.
Thank you very
really
much.
easy to get hold of me. Maybe I shouldn't say that's so easy to get hold of me. Yes, it is.
You're very accessible, yeah. Sorry, so those three ways,
yeah, those three, yeah.
Thank you very much. It's very generous. So I would suggest with the phone number, just send a text first, guys. Don't pick up the phone.
Yes.
Be better. Dave, once again, thank you very much for taking time out to be our guest today. Really appreciate
Such a
it.
pleasure.
And to speak to you soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Susan.
You're very
Bye.
welcome.